Lots of reaction this week to the case of actor Jussie Smollett. Chicago police say Smollett staged a racist and anti-gay attack on himself because he was dissatisfied with his salary.
This announcement today recognizes that Empire actor Jussie Smollett took advantage of the pain and anger of racism to promote his career. I'm left hanging my head and asking why.
And it was a chaotic scene at the courthouse earlier this week. Smollett being pushed through a media crush by security after a court appearance on charges of filing a false police report. Now, he's accused of staging a racist anti-gay attack on himself in Chicago. Smollett turned himself in and was released on $100,000 bail. Chicago police called it a publicity stunt to boost his salary. Now, the producers of the TV show Empire say Smollett's character will be removed from the final 2 episodes of this season. So for more on this, I'm joined by Ernest Owens, and he is a writer at large with Philadelphia Magazine. Hello to you.
Hi, thank you for having me on.
And we're also joined by Anita Lee, and she is the Director of Communities with the Discourse, a digital media company that fills in gaps in underserved communities. She's with us right here in studio. Hello, Anita.
Hi, Aarti.
All right, so Ernest, let's begin with you on this topic. Just starting with your reaction to the twists and turns we've seen in this story so far.
You know, it's just been, a devastation. Jussie Smollett is an actor that many in the LGBTQ community and the Black community combined has really embraced. He has been a trailblazer in many ways, being one of the few young, gifted, and talented Black gay actors to really have a starring role on a major TV show in years. And for all of these breakthroughs and developments has been a betrayal to the community at large, and has really kind of set us into trauma, because a lot of this conversation around hoaxes and hate crimes has really opened up a can of worms.
So, Anita, I want to take that point to you then. When it says, like, open up, when we hear Ernest say open up a whole new can of worms, what is that can of worms? We know that really as soon as this story came out, everyone jumped on it.
Yeah, so my immediate reaction was that the coverage of a lot of media outlets was irresponsible. There was a lack of fact-checking. There was an almost knee-jerk willingness to feed into a really polarizing narrative without corroborating the facts. For example, a lot of media outlets did not use the word alleged, and they also were immediately publishing think pieces that presumed Smollett's innocence before the police investigation was actually completed. But I also want to make and emphasize the point that it's been the coverage of the aftermath has been equally irresponsible because of the fact that Smollett has only been charged with filing a false police report and has not yet been convicted.
Exactly. So and we're trying to be very clear in our coverage here that these are allegations by the police. He has been charged with submitting that or falsifying a police report. And initially he had alleged that he had been attacked, and that's what police were investigating. And, I want to go back to you, Ernest, because what's important here too is that, as you mentioned, yes, there were some media outlets that weren't saying alleged. I know that there was some backlash towards media who were using alleged because everyone wanted to get on board with this story, and they were being criticized, in fact, for saying that they were using the term alleged. Why weren't they believing him? What do you think about that, Ernest?
Well, I think right now we're at a time where there is a lot of pressure on journalists, especially in this social media era, to be sensitive to communities of color, to LGBTQ people, and to other marginalized groups. And at a time where people are encouraged to believe victims, which we should continue to do in our personal lives, I think that there was a collision between, very, due diligence in reporting and also that of the court of public opinion. And when those things merge, through think pieces, when they emerge through social media takes, and when it emerges through people's consciousness of the readers clashing with the reporters on sensitivity matters, this is how you get a situation like this.
And, to that point of the fact that certainly there needs to be a due diligence that is done on the one side, but also we are in a climate very much so of listening to the victims and hearing them speak and believing, that is sort of the climate that we're in right now. So how do these two things conflict then when we see a story play out and unfold in the manner that it has with Jussie Smollett?
So I absolutely agree. Like, hate crimes are a real threat in society, and in 2017 in Canada they were at an all-time high, particularly against Black people, Jews, and Muslims. So it's really important to, I think it's not about immediately. It's about taking these allegations of hate crimes and reports very seriously. So authorities, not only the authorities, also journalists have to do their due diligence. And journalists have to remember that inaccurately reporting on a hate crime report or allegation only does a disservice to hate crime victims, because it only further serves to re-traumatize them. It also dissuades them from reporting on the hate crime. So it's really important for us to be rigorous and accurate.
And to that point, I also want to say here, you know, it's not just media. So this question for you, Ernest, because it's also, we saw stars, politicians, public figures, all jumping to the defense of Jussie Smollett, and not necessarily being questioned about that after, though there, you know, there certainly was on social media calls for them to be held to account because they were so quick to jump to the defense of Jussie Smollett when it was still allegations at the time. So how does this change, Ernest, the dynamic, or how much might it damage how quickly people are to come to the defense of others who are alleging that they've been a victim of a hate crime?
Well, you know, personally, I hope it doesn't as much. I mean, at the end of the day, I do think that Jussie Smollett's situation is an outlier to this whole incidence of hate crimes. As we know in research, especially in the United States, that there is an extremely big, huge difference between hoax that are actually happening versus actual reported hate crimes. And so let's not make an outlier define the rest of the situations that are happening. The only reason why this was a unique case is the code of celebrity. I mean, Jussie Smollett is a high-profile individual. He's a celebrity. He's friends with some of these elected officials. You know, we saw him with Maxine Rivers, you know, at a protest a couple of months ago. He has a reputation within this political establishment and within a lot of the big-name stars. So let's be clear that people, some of them jumped on the wagon because they also had an affinity to him and a relationship with him. So I think we have to also understand that this is a situation that involves a lot of high-profile people, and the rest of us as fans and viewers are going to also have our personal bias.
And of course, the other aspect to this was the fact that it was linked to, according to the original report, linked to MAGA supporters, Make America Great Again supporters. And that sort of added a whole new dynamic to it all. What does it say about where we are today that this story unfolded the way it did with all of those players?
Well, I feel like there's this polarizing narrative. It's so difficult these days, particularly in the US, but also in Canada, we see this rising populism, to have productive conversation about challenging topics. And I think it's really important for us to engage with each other and genuinely listen to each other. And the media has a big responsibility to play in this role, because due to the crisis-driven daily news cycle, a lot of journalists don't have the time, the resources, nor the incentive, because of the fact that clickbait feeds into an ad model on which a lot of media outlets rely, to slow down and actually take the time to produce thoughtful coverage. So for me, as a journalist, my responsibility is to look at solutions and also to do my reporting more rigorously in order to create the kind of space for these conversations to exist.
And I'll take that exact same question to you, Ernest, too.
Well, you know, I think for myself, I believe that we're going to continue to have to just emphasize community people, emphasize everyday people, continue to cover hate crimes, not only when they happen to celebrities, but when they happen to individual citizens. I think part of the reason why this issue got highly politicized is because, as a whole, the communities and the journalism community does not do a very, I think, thorough job at talking to everyday people, covering hate crimes across the board, so that they rely on the code of celebrity to amplify these bigger national stories. We cannot rest any movement work, any work on public service on the backs and shoulders of celebrities in order to get the message across. We have to do more community work.
Very important conversation. I appreciate both of your time today so that we could have this dialogue again with our viewers too. So thank you again to both of you. Ernest Owens is a writer at large with Philadelphia Magazine, and Anita Lee here in studio is a director of communities with the Discourse. Thank you again to both of you.